Hi, my name is Nara Kasbergen, and I'm here from NPR, where I am the technical lead for emerging platforms focused primarily on voice. Now, sometimes people are surprised to hear that NPR is investing so heavily in the voice space, but for us, we actually consider it a matter of our survival. Turns out people are not buying radios anymore, but they are buying these devices, and so that's why my team was created in order to ensure that NPR has a solid presence on all of these platforms. But it turns out that we've actually had a surprisingly hard time. Because these platforms are still focused primarily on text-to-speech and audio, it has often been an afterthought. And so that's why my talk here today is sort of a quick and dirty summary of some of our experiences trying to build world-class audio-first experiences for voice platforms, and comparing and contrasting some of our experiences on Alexa versus Google Assistant, and primarily that's where I'm talking about AOG. And so I'll walk through a couple of different scenarios for different kinds of skills and actions that we tried to build. And so the very first one that we started with was our Play NPR, Alexa Scale, and Google action, which is where we match a user up with their local NPR member station and play its live stream. And these live streams are available in different kinds of audio formats. So on Alexa, we had a surprisingly easy time once we figured out the way the platform works, since this was our very first in-house skill. It was easy because the Alexa audio player supports streaming audio very seamlessly out of the box, including multiple file formats, so things like MP3 and AAC, and also playlist files like PLS and M3U. And a nice thing that we discovered along the way that we didn't know we needed at the start, but that it turned out to be essential, was there's these audio lifecycle events, which includes this event called Playback failed, which triggers either when the stream doesn't play at all or if it drops out halfway through. And so in this case, we log the error. We can get in touch with the NPR member station, say, there's a problem with your live stream, let's fix it. So all in all, that was a pretty good experience. However, on AOG, the experience was pretty bad because it turns out that AOG just doesn't support streaming audio at all. And so in order to build our Play NPR action, we actually had to use a different API called Media Actions, which is a partner API for sort of approved parties only, so not available to the general public. And our big problem with that was that originally we'd been hoping to build this in a way where we could share some of the core code that was common across both Alexa and Google Assistant. But because Media Actions use an entirely different architecture, that just turned out to be impossible. And so we had to start completely from scratch, which was something that we'd been hoping not to do. So we were not really happy with that experience. Now, a more complex scenario is when we were trying to build out NPR One, which is another one of our products. This is where we sort of try to imagine what if we invented radio today. And so here we've taken some of our longer programs and chopped them up into shorter segments, which are 2 to 3 minutes long. And we mix those in with longer podcasts, sometimes up to an hour, and create these continuous playlists where one piece will play right after the other. But users have control over the experience using things like pause, resume, skip, fast forward, rewind. You can mark pieces as interesting, and you can also ask the voice assistant what's playing. For example, if you're hearing a podcast that you've never heard before, but you want to keep listening. So for Alexa, on the whole, the experience was pretty good. Essential thing was obviously this ability to support seamless autoplay, where one piece can play right after the other, and that's supported out of the box. There are also built-in intents for things like pause, resume, start over, and skip. Another nice thing is that audio just automatically resumes after a text-to-speech interruption. So here, if the user says, Alexa, ask NPR One what's playing, Alexa can say the name of the podcast that the user is listening to, and then the audio just resumes seamlessly right after. So that's nice. And again, this playback failed event is very important because here we can actually recover from the error. We just immediately play the next piece in the playlist. But on the bad side, one of the weird quirks about the Alexa audio player is that once you actually start audio playback, your skills session ends. And that creates all of these sort of weird quirks in your development workflow. And as developers, it's just really hard for us to wrap our heads around. It doesn't make any sense. It's very unintuitive. Another issue is that there's no built-in intents for things like fast forward, rewind, and what's playing. And so although we can implement these using custom events, or custom intents, it's actually still not a good user experience because users never remember that they have to say, Alexa, ask NPR One what's playing. They just want to be able to say, Alexa, what's playing? And so even though we have these, users don't really take advantage of them because they never remember the right utterance. And finally, our analytics folks, one of their core requirements anytime that we're building any kind of audio experience is the ability to do heartbeat events, which is where every 5 minutes or so, they want to check in to see is the user still listening to this audio piece, and if so, ping the analytics server, send an event, and record that the user is still listening. But because there's no way at all to do timed events on the Alexa platform, these heartbeat events are just impossible. And so our analytics folks are pretty unhappy with that. But then some of the really bad stuff is primarily related to this event called Playback Nearly Finished, which is also part of the Alexa audio lifecycle. The big issue with this event is that it's actually misnamed. It doesn't fire as you would think when playback is nearly done playing. It actually fires within a second or so of audio starting to play. My coworker's theory is that it fires when the audio is actually done downloading. And the big problem with that is that this is the only event that allows you to queue up the next audio piece to play. And so that kind of restricts what we're actually able to do. You can't make a decision after someone has listened to an hour of a podcast of what they might want to listen to next. You basically already have to know before they even start playing the piece what the next thing to queue up is. So on AOG, it was kind of an interesting, different story. AOG does support this seamless autoplay with a little bit of a hack that I'll talk more about in just a second. It also has built-in intents for things like pause, resume, and start over. And if you use the Assistant app, then there's more advanced play controls like fast forward and rewind. So that's certainly a nice to have. Now, the seamless autoplay hack is still pretty bad. Basically, AOG has this restriction where you can never play audio without the voice assistant also saying something. So we hacked our way around that and just used SSML to include an audio file, which is just an MP3 with a half second of silence. And so that kind of comes across as a seamless autoplay experience, even though it's technically not. AOG also only supports MP3 files, and that's a bit of a problem for us because some of our audio is available only in AAC format. And then finally, even though you can fast forward and rewind using the Assistant app, there's actually no way at all to implement fast forward and rewind for voice controls. But some of the really bad stuff is actually the fact that there is no concept at all of this playback failed event on AOG. And so that's a problem because we don't necessarily always control where audio comes from. Some of it comes from third parties. And so every now and then, we do get a file that fails to play. And we should be able to recover from that, but on AOG you can't. There's just no event that fires at all. Your action is basically done at that point. You can't even play an error message for the user. So that's a really bad user experience. And the other big problem is that audio does not auto-resume after a text-to-speech interruption. So again, the use case here is the user says, hey Google, ask NPR1 what's playing. And so Google Assistant can actually say what the thing is, but then cannot actually go back to the audio piece that was playing before. And even if, audio resume, fine, maybe it's not built into the platform, but we can't even build this in ourselves because it turns out that there's no way at all to start playing audio from a specific offset. The AOG platform only allows you to play audio from the beginning. So both of these were such big deal breakers that this is actually the reason why we never went live with NPR1 for Google Assistant. It was just too bad of a user experience that we kind of gave up and move on. And so final use case is something that we're working on right now, which is kind of still a secret project. Hopefully we'll be able to announce something in the next couple of months. But we're working on the ability to play a specific popular program on demand, which will play an hour of that program. And so there was an interesting design ask at one point where once that hour is finished, the voice assistant will come back and say, that's all for now. Would you like to switch to your live station stream? Interestingly enough, turns out to be completely impossible to do this on Alexa, because on Alexa, if you're using the native audio player and you're finished playing a piece, there's no way to actually have the voice assistant say anything at all or even ask a question. And ironically, this is one of the only areas where AOG does a better job than Alexa. On AOG, this is entirely possible. So overall, we've had a little bit of a struggle trying to build what we were originally hoping to build in these sort of world-class audio-first experiences. For us, it feels like we're not asking for a lot, but it's just a struggle when the platforms are just not really prioritizing audio so much right now. And so some of the key elements for us are things like a full set of audio lifecycle events, which includes start, stop, finished, nearly finished, and failed. And nearly finished here really should be what it's actually called. Or if another way that Alexa could solve that problem is just allow us to queue up audio in response to any of these and not just nearly finished. We also want built-in intents for all play control, so both of them support things like pause, resume, skip, and start over, but we also really need support for things like fast forward, rewind, and what's playing. It's essential that audio be able to auto-resume after a text-to-speech interruption. The voice assistant should be able to speak after playing audio, and again, our analytics folks really need this ability to be able to do heartbeat events. So that's all I have time for today, but feel free to come talk to me afterwards if you have questions about any of this. And several of my coworkers are also here, so all of us are here for the entire length of the conference, so feel free to come talk to us about audio for voice platforms. Thank you very much.